Hello, I have a question. How do you store your filaments? Out in the open, stacked in towers that almost reach the ceiling? In vacuum bags all over the place?
Wet. It's too long ago.
In large, more or less airtight boxes in which you have thrown the little bags of desiccant that always come with a filament? I have a bit of everything, but what really annoys me are these vacuum bags in which I store my hygroscopic filaments. Apart from the questionable necessity of storing filaments in a vacuum, it's just incredibly annoying to take the spools out and put them back in every time. The much better method is obviously to use dry boxes from which I can print directly. I could just buy any kind of box and you don't have to search long on the internet to find really cool dry boxes that can do all kinds of things. But maybe some of you are already thinking, just get a cheap food storage box, download any model from the internet and you're done. And yes, I want the box to be as inexpensive as possible, and these storage boxes are the best choice for that. In addition, the 3D printing community has already created a lot of models for the most common boxes, and originally I wanted to use one of them, but why the f are there thousands of models out there, half of which are exactly the same, and I couldn't find a single one that can do everything I wanted to. I don't want to need half a kilo of filament for each box and drill dozens of holes for 12 different screws. I don't want to be limited to using only very narrow spools because there are ball bearings in the way left and right. And I don't want to cut huge holes in the boxes that I then have to close again with printed parts, which subsequently let moisture into the box because unlike the rest of the box, they are not made of PP, which is, by the way, the perfect material for a dry box, because it's not hygroscopic at all and therefore doesn't allow moisture to get into the box over a long time. I want more than just space for half a gram of silica gel. I want little labels that say which filament is inside so I can easily switch them around. And above all, I want to be able to take the box, put it on my poly dryer and dry my filament directly in the box without, as I said, having to replace huge parts of the box with printed ones first. And if you don't have a poly dryer, who cares? The box shouldn't have any features that are useless without a dryer. So I decided on a storage box that is very inexpensive and already very popular. This is a box. Maybe you already have one yourself. For this I created a design in Fusion that meets all my requirements. I paid 5 euros each for these, but you can get them even cheaper on AliExpress. In the end I spent about 10 euros per box, which has more features than one that you can buy off the shelf for 30 euros or more. And of course you'll be able to download my design for free on my Printables profile. There's a link in the video description.
Yeah, so quickly on the design. As I said, it should use as little material as possible. The box shouldn't have any new openings except for 2 small holes, and it should be compatible with my poly dryer. But at the same time, it should not require any features or modifications that are unnecessary if you don't own the dryer. The box will later stand upside down with a lid facing downwards. The spool runs on these 2 axles, which have the same diameter as the ball bearings. This provides enough space even for wider spools. The bearings do not rotate, but if the edge ever comes into contact with the bearing, the resistance is so low that it makes no difference. However, the spool cannot go too far to the outside as the box is slightly narrower at the top. The hygrometer goes at the front, and on either side of it are these 2 things whose function you'll see later. At the back there is a container for silica gel beds, and I've added a second container for more desiccant in case of the filament isn't completely dry when it goes into the box or is stored in it for a very long time. At the front there are 2 couplings, either self-printed from TPU or a classic PC4M10 coupling that also attaches the label holder. For this coupling I also created a seal, which I won't be using myself, but which some people will certainly need. After a few iterations of the individual parts with improvements and new ideas, I finally had a finished model for the Drybox. Before we continue, a quick word about the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. PCBWay offers you a service that turns your hardware ideas into reality, be it printed circuit boards assembled on request, CNC milled parts, laser cut steel sheets, 3D printed parts made of plastic or metal, injection molded parts and much more. At PCBWay you get everything from a single source. Simply upload your file in the configurator, select the production process, the finish, quantity and many other options and receive your individual quote. PCBWay will take care of the rest and the parts will arrive in your mailbox shortly afterwards. Check out the first link in the video description to have your own parts made. Many thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. So for one box you will need the following parts: a box, the base, a hygrometer, the silica container, and if you want a second one, 4 screws, 4 ball bearings, 2 axles and 2 printed washers, the label holder and of course a label, a piece of PTFE tubing, a coupling and the nut for it. Then you have the choice of using a TPU coupling or a second PC4M10. A sealing cap if you want, a drilling jig and of course a drill bit for the 10mm holes. I'd recommend a step drill for this as it will produce the best holes. And finally the adapter for the poly dryer, if you have one. In total you need about 100 grams of filament for one box. I used PCTG for this and would recommend using at least PTG. PLA is not suitable for this. For the coupling I use filament with a shore hardness of 82A, which is a slightly softer TPU. When buying the boxes you should note that there are 2 different versions. The left one with 3 grooves fits spools up to 70mm wide, while the right one with 1 groove only fits spools up to 58mm wide. To ensure that the box stands upright without wobbling, we need to modify the lid slightly, as the tab for the small lid, which we don't need, is in the way. I score the tab at the bottom with a cutter, and here I must warn you, do this carefully. Cutter knives can cause nasty injuries very quickly if you don't use them properly. Always cut away from your body, not towards it. Make sure that your other hand or anything else is not in the way of the direction in which you are applying force. If you slip, it should not be your body that stops the blade. If you look closely, you can see that I am pushing with my left thumb and not with my right hand, which is holding the knife. This way I can't slip uncontrollably and cause the blade to end up somewhere else. Once the tab has been scored, you can simply break it off. The deeper you make the cut, the cleaner the edge will be. Next, the holes can be drilled. Don't be surprised, the template says 9mm, but 10mm is the correct size. Then attach the coupling with the label holder and in my case the printed TPU seal at the top. This can be pressed into the hole more easily with a small screwdriver. Now put the base on the lid and screw the axles together. There needs to be a printed washer between the bearing and the axle on one side. This is the side where the axle stands on the print bed, so I didn't design it in like on the other side. I'm using M5x20 screws here, but slightly shorter ones will work just as well. You can find the exact parts you need in my upload on printables. Add the silica container and hygrometer and the box is basically finished. A few labels are also needed, of course. Here you can see why I made 2 connectors. Firstly to allow for 2 filament feed options, the upper is better suited for very brittle filaments, and secondly to be able to seal the box airtight after unloading the filament from the printer. The holder for these labels actually works upside down too, just depending on how and which couplings you want to use. You can also put the sealing cap on here, but I'll show you a simpler version later that's cheaper and doesn't need any flex filament. To dry the spool in the box, simply open the lid and lift the spool together with the container and the base. These small tabs next to the hygrometer are for this purpose. This allows you to simply slide the whole thing onto the adapter and you only need one additional part if you own the poly dryer.
By the way, if you like projects like this, I would be very happy if you leave a like and subscribe to my channel. This helps my still quite small channel a lot. Of course, I didn't just build a single box, but wanted to fundamentally improve my filament storage.
That meant I had to scale up production a bit. To be precise, I started with 24 boxes and will certainly be adding a few more in the future. I print quite often with hygroscopic materials, as you can probably guess. First I screwed all the axes together. These already have an M5 thread built in, by the way. When you print the first axis, you can easily determine whether the filament has been over or under extruded, by how easily or difficult it is to screw in the screw.
(3:28 a.m.)
I just found out that these ball bearings here on the lid are almost like these Euleric discs. Come on. How cool is that? While printing all the parts and manufacturing the boxes, I of course made small improvements to the design from time to time. And I noticed that the Z-seam on the axis is a bit problematic if it is slightly over extruded, as the axis can get stuck there instead of continuing to rotate. I therefore set the Z-seam to random in the slicer and finished the remaining axis with a knife. What I find to be a very simple and inexpensive method of making an airtight plug for the couplings is to take a short piece of PTFE tubing, push some filament through it and heat it up. Once it is soft enough, pull the filament back and press it firmly together on the table. This forms a tight seal inside the tube. Since I didn't have enough tubing for all the boxes at the time, this was a very simple solution and less work than printing plugs from TPU. I don't know whether I have enough silica. Of course, all the boxes need a place to go, so I made a few shelves where all the filaments can be stored neatly and sorted. And yes, I took these shots before I made the dry boxes. I first placed the boxes on the board to find out how many would fit on one board and how far apart I should mount the shelf brackets. The answer was 10 and 75. One thing that could be interesting. This sounds solid, less solid, a little bit more solid, and not solid at all. So this is definitely drywall, and here not anymore. So yeah, we will see. As long as you have the right dowels, it doesn't really matter whether it's a drywall or a solid brick wall. What's more annoying is when the drill decides to drill the hole a few centimeters elsewhere. Anyone who has ever done this in an old stone house will know what I mean. Fortunately, that didn't happen here. By the way, these boards are made of the same material as the tables on which my printers stand. They are chipboards laminated with HPL, not the cheap version from the hardware store, but the good 0.9mm thick one. This surface is extremely robust and therefore ideal for such work applications. Once the shelf was finished, I could finally put the boxes in their new place. And oh man, I love how tidy it is.
And that already brings us to the end of this video. I've been working with these Dryboxes for a while now, and I'm really happy to finally have a separate box for each spool that's just as easy to use as I imagined it would be. As I said, you can find the files in the link in the video description on my printables profile. Feel free to follow me there and subscribe to my channel. Please also write in the comments what projects you would like to see next, or what you would change about my Drybox. Until then, take care and see you in the next one.